Hey everyone, and welcome back to Movie Club. My name is Patrick Smith, and I'm the host and curator here at this club, and I'm so delighted you've joined us for our last regular screening of October. Of course, we have another screening on Saturday for our bonus Halloween extravaganza, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Now, I'm just gonna get it out of the way. Everyone's already noticed it, you're all already looking at it, so there's no point in hiding it. I trimmed my beard a little. I know, I thought it looked cute too. Now the past 2 weeks have seen us tackle two very different but also very important films when it comes to the auteur known as Wes Craven. We started off with A Nightmare on Elm Street, which is a fantastic slasher from the 80s. And then last week we did the fantastic meta masterpiece that is Scream. This week, we're going back a little bit further into the timeline, especially for the slasher subgenre, to a completely different auteur who we'll be covering tonight and then again on Halloween night. And that, of course, is John Carpenter. Now, John Carpenter is, if you even remotely like horror, a name you should recognize. He did the fantastic film Halloween. Obviously, this is the score for the new one from 2018, which will also be part of the double feature on Halloween. But John Carpenter is one of those singular talents that not only does a fantastic job at directing horror movies, but he's also a really great composer. And that's incredibly special. Now, part of that is due to the fact that, especially with low-budget horror movies, they typically run out of money when it comes to paying a composer. John was talented enough, so he offered his talents to the composing department as well, to also save the production a little bit more money so he could actually try and accomplish the vision that he had for Halloween. Carpenter has directed a ridiculous amount of classics when it comes to horror movies, especially cult classics. But tonight we're engaging with his cult classic creature feature film from 1982, The Thing. Now, this film, upon its release, was not an instant success. Part of that was due to another director who had just debuted one of their films a couple days prior. And that would be Steven Spielberg and his film, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Audiences immediately fell in love with Elliot and his misadventures with this weird alien known as E.T. So when Carpenter's very nihilistic vision came to the screen, with a ton of gore and guts and violence, audiences and critics alike weren't interested. Critics hated this movie when they first saw it. Said it was one of the darkest and most depressing movies they'd ever seen. And audiences obviously had already found the alien that they wanted to see on the big screen. And they weren't really delighted by the madness that Carpenter and crew had cooked up. In fact, it took a couple years before this film finally started to gain the cult classic status that it now holds. Now critics praise it for being a masterclass in how to develop tension and create a compelling and interesting whodunit with fantastic special effects that still hold up to this day. But Carpenter wasn't alone in creating this genuine masterpiece of terror. He also had the incredible camera stylings of cinematographer Dean Cundy at his services. Cundy had already assisted him with multiple other films and would go on to be a consistent part of Carpenter's crew throughout the rest of his filmic career. And in fact, ironically enough, Cundy would join forces with Spielberg a decade and change later to be the cinematographer for a fantastic film from 1993, Jurassic Park. Cundy is a great tool for directors because he always helps them find the tone that they're going for visually and conveys dread and tension so effortlessly in his work. Combine that with the talents of the directors that he's been able to work with and work under for most of his career, and you consistently get some of the most impressive visually designed films alongside some of the more important films in film history, especially modern film history. We also have some other incredible stylings in the music department, this time the work of Ennio Morricone. Morricone passed away earlier this year and was mostly known for his spaghetti western scores, but he once composed for a horror film, and that would be John Carpenter's The Thing. I have this incredible anthology of John Carpenter's scores from his films, and ironically, there's only 2 scores in this anthology that Carpenter didn't create, and that would be Morricone's for The Thing and the Starman score. It's kind of weird for Carpenter to not do his scores. He typically does it mostly out of necessity. By not needing to pay another person to compose the score for the film, Carpenter saves some more money for the producers and is able to use that to keep more of his creative vision on the screen. But Morricone's score here is instantly iconic. It's subtle, it's dark, it's pulsing, and it holds much of the same tension that the movie itself does. And ironically enough, Morricone composed a lot more music than actually made it to the screen in this film. Carpenter just loved his main theme and interpolated it throughout. And you know what? For once, I don't feel like the score feels all that repetitive and mostly works as just a single piece of music throughout the entire film. But that's because Morricone's that good. A couple years later, when Tarantino was making his 8th film, The Hateful Eight, ironically, more pieces from that score would be used by Tarantino in that film. Effectively, Morricone didn't need to rescore a film because he already had some music that had just been on the cutting room floor for decades. As I already mentioned, the special effects in this movie are truly out of this world, and that's mostly thanks to Rob Bottin. Rob Bottin was first introduced to John Carpenter by cinematographer Dean Cundey on the film The Fog. At first, Bottin was only supposed to do a couple simple makeup effects, but ended up being one of the major players in that film. He returned for The Thing, and was only 22 years old when he created most of the special effects that are still mind-blowing to this day. His love of the craft and how hard the schedule was on literally everyone who worked in that movie was so exhausting that he literally was sent to the hospital when filming wrapped. Bottin is still considered one of the foremost experts in makeup effects for film. His work is celebrated alongside that of Tom Savini, who is kind of the master of gore. I would definitely be remiss to not mention the fantastic work by the cast here. Of course, as I previously mentioned, Keith David is here to play Childs, one of the best characters in this movie, and one of the guys who actually puts up a fight when things start to shift under everyone's feet. What's so impressive about this horror movie is that instead of your typical schlock where your characters are running away and trying to hide from the killer, these men are actively pursuing the threat and are trying their best to survive and keep everyone else alive while they do it. There's not really any stupid mistakes here, which makes watching these characters so much more fun. Part of that is due to the fantastic script work here and the fantastic directing of John Carpenter, with it keeping you in the dark as to who is the killer, who is the thing throughout the whole movie. You're just as in the dark as the characters are. You don't have the information you need to keep yelling at those characters the right decisions to make, so when they make a wrong decision, you're just as surprised as they are. That is great filmmaking. Wilford Brimley is also in this movie. I'm sure you are aware of what he's mostly known for, but Brimley is also just a fantastic character actor, and here I think he does some of the best work he ever did, playing the main medical doctor in charge here, Dr. Blair. Now, he is sans mustache here, so he may look a little bit different to how you know him, but he's one of my favorite characters in this movie. I think part of it is how many darkly comedic lines he gets to deliver, and he does it so perfectly.
Blair, have you seen Fuchs?
I don't want to stay out here anymore. I want to come back inside.
He's one of the best actors in this all the way around, and he gives a fantastic performance. The rest of the cast is fantastic, but let's be honest, we're all really here for Kurt Russell. Now, this is early hot Kurt Russell as well, and he is here to lead this group to victory no matter what happens. He is not technically the one in charge, but effectively, everyone looks to him for advice and wisdom, and they trust him. And he's largely the main character that we follow. And for good reason. This guy is a fantastic character to follow, as Kurt Russell plays Mac, the helicopter pilot who is really the only one that has a remote chance of getting everyone out alive. If you've never seen this film before, you might be wondering what the story is here. So I'll sum it up real quick for you, as I've been doing for the past couple videos. Our main men are an Antarctic research team, which means they're about as far from humanity as you possibly can get. They're isolated, and they just so happen to come across something incredibly disturbing and dangerous. When a rogue helicopter drives into their camp chasing a dog trying to murder it, they take action to protect their compound and kill the two men in the process, while saving the dog. They recognize the helicopter from another outpost that's not that far, and Mac and crew head over there to investigate. What they find is a scene of carnage and horror, unlike anything they've ever seen before. Something truly alien has happened here. Things quickly go to hell in a handbasket when they return back with a discovery. One of the things they find while they're at this other outpost is a melted block of ice that looks like it might have been the bed for something else. Something that doesn't belong here. They bring back the evidence they've found to camp and find that they've discovered a life form that can imitate anything it comes into contact with. And they quickly realize that they've brought the very thing that can do that into their camp. What follows is a story of mistrust, murder, and intrigue, as well as pure, unadulterated horror. It's one of the best examples of how to build tension and mystery in a film effectively. And I'm glad it's gained the cult classic status that it truly deserves. John Carpenter would go on to direct quite a few other movies, including the Stephen King adaptation Christine about a murderous car, as well as a couple other joints with Kurt Russell. But this will always remain one of my favorites, alongside Halloween, because it truly shows how incredibly talented this young director was. I really hope that one day we'll get some more films from John Carpenter, because he truly is the master, or one of the masters, of this genre. But for now, we can look back on these couple films of his that we do have. And tonight, we're going to do just that, as we dive deep into the terror that is 1982's fantastic horror film, The Thing.